Hello everyone, my name is Avid CS, and today we're going to be refuting Jeremy John's video on Superman. I thought the video was pretty terrible, so let's get into it.
But let's be honest, we were all ready for that hopeful vision of Superman on screen again. And we got it in the form of this Superman who tortured a world leader with a cactus. To be fair, at least Lois called him out and was like, you mean torture? He does kind of come across as an asshole there, right? He's like, the spikes were, it didn't hurt that much, but he doesn't know that. He doesn't know how much cactus spikes hurt. How could he qualify that?
Superman was obviously not trying to hurt the leader, which is why he uses a cactus in the desert. This Superman is experienced enough to know that it won't hurt the world leader. We also know that this same world leader was being funded by Lex Luthor to invade the other country.
You know, a big thing about this movie, I've seen other reviewers touch on this, and I do agree that this is a BVS overcorrection. The Snyderverse, I'm not going to try to compare this to the Snyderverse too much, but there are moments where it's like, it's a fair comparison. The Snyderverse feeling like it had to fast track the setup for their cinematic universe because the MCU had them beat. They had a jump on them by a few years.
I disagree. I don't think this is course correction for Batman vs. Superman. I think James Gunn just wanted to tell a story that doesn't involve the origin of Superman. The Batman proved you don't need to start your superhero franchise with an origin for the character. As long as you establish these characters, their motives, their whatever, you should not have to rely on a backstory for every single character.
Not gonna do that this time around. This time around, it's a cinematic universe that's already been set up. We're just coming into the middle of it. Metahumans have been around for 300 years. Kal-El's been Superman for 3 years. He just lost his first fight, something that would feel really important, but we got none of the setup and we didn't even see him lose the first fight. We came in at about the Joe Rogan interview session of the UFC fight after it was done. But then, they got back to fighting, so there's that. But it did leave me with that feeling of, who are these people? Why do we care? The movie assumes that you already know. I know Christopher Reeve's Superman backstory. I know Henry Cavill's Superman backstory. I know some of the comic book Superman backstory. But I don't really know this Superman backstory.
Even if you don't know Superman's backstory, the movie gives it to you through dialogue. We don't need the backstory in this movie because the movie doesn't call for their backstory, unlike Man of Steel or Superman 78 that focuses on a much younger Superman in the beginning of their careers. Us seeing Superman after he lost his first fight is important because it's setting the tone for the type of Superman we're gonna get.
I also don't know much about the Justice Gang, who they are.
Remember he says this, it comes back up later.
Lex Luthor, why does he hate Superman so much? I know why Lex traditionally hates Superman, but the movie doesn't illustrate why this Lex in particular hates this Superman. I mean, yeah, there is a tell don't show moment in here in which he kind of monologues about it, but you don't feel the lead up. You don't see the lead up. In fact, a lot of what Lex Luthor did, he does a lot on paper in terms of checklist, but a lot of it happened before this movie even started, so you don't really feel it.
Lex tells us, the audience, why he hates Superman. We don't need an entire movie dedicated to why Lex hates Superman, and honestly, we don't need to see Lex make the Engineer and Ultraman. We don't need to see Lex create the Raptors. We don't need to see Lex create the Pocket Dimension. We don't need to see Lex have meetings with the dictator of Baravia. We know he's smart enough to do so. We know he's intelligent enough to do all these things.
Lex Luthor's scheme is so convoluted. Give me a Lex Luthor with one masterstroke involving a couple of nukes and a fault line. That's good.
Why is it convoluted? It's very simple to understand. He wanted to destroy Superman's reputation. He wanted to expose Superman for what he thought Superman truly was. Also, Lex Luthor's plan in Superman 78 is terrible. In fact, I would argue it's worse than what we get in Superman 2025. The setup for Lex Luthor's plan in Superman 78 makes no sense.
Coming into this Superman movie almost feels like we're coming into the second or third movie. Imagine the first X-Men movie. It's the year 2000. X-Men's coming out. And the first X-Men movie you get is X-Men 3: The Last Stand. You wouldn't know why they're all here and what they're fighting for and why it matters for them, though it might be clear on paper why they would fight for the fight they're fighting. You would be lost, or if X-Men 3 is a bit hyperbolic, X2 X-Men United, at the very least. Same rule applies. There's at least 1 or 2 movies taking place before this Superman movie that we just didn't get.
With that logic, you can make the exact same argument for the Batman. In this movie, we learn what these characters have been doing in the months and years before the events of the movie.
And this movie is a lot of series of events stitched together. And if you cut some of those events out, it wouldn't really affect the plot too much, and you might actually have some more time to flesh out some of the other characters like Lex Luthor. Easiest thing to point to is that kaiju that he fights. The kaiju is a little monster. It's kind of, it reminds me of, did you ever have those little things, little like, they look like gummy dinosaurs, but they weren't gummies, they're not edible. You drop them in a jar of water and overnight they would just grow. It reminded me of one of those. Sans the water. I don't think he needed water. But Lex Luthor somehow came across this kaiju and now Superman has to fight him. It's a really weird splice where they're like, he'll get bigger. Next scene, he's big and Superman's fighting him. No setup, no care.
Yes, cutting out the kaiju fight does affect the plot of the movie. Let's say the kaiju fight is cut out of the movie. How are you going to explain the way Lex distracts Superman? Lex Luthor uses the kaiju to distract Superman so he doesn't go back to the Fortress of Solitude so early. We didn't need to see the kaiju grow. It would have just dragged out the film. Now I want you to remember what he said earlier about the Justice Gang.
I also don't know much about the Justice Gang, who they are.
If you cut the kaiju fight from the movie, you cut the scene introducing us to the Justice Gang. This scene establishes their relationship with Superman and shows they've been around for a long time. The first time they would show up is after Superman is exposed and he's in that building.
Almost feels like another overcorrection from Superman Returns. The whole thing about Superman Returns is, well, Superman never punches anything. He never fights anything, really. He actually has his fair share of fights in this movie, so I don't think he needed to fight the kaiju. I don't think he needed to give a big monster the sensation of stepping on a Lego.
Jeremy, that's just not true. The kaiju was a distraction for Superman. He needed to fight the kaiju. Also, the scene establishes that Superman will go out of his way to save people and animals while making sure they're okay.
But then they make Lex Luthor this pissy little brat knocking pencils off his desk so his little interns have to clean it up just because he's being petty. I don't know, I just don't like Lex Luthor like that. I like it when Lex Luthor is being menacing. Give me Michael Rosenbaum Lex Luthor all day long.
I didn't think it was worth showing, but he goes on to talk about Lex Luthor and how good he is in this movie. But then he kind of ruins it by what he says about Lex being upset. Lex wasn't being upset because he was petty. It was because Metamorpho and Superman broke out of the prison. It just feels really disingenuous to dumb down why Lex was upset to begin with.
And he says in the movie he did all of this just to kill Superman, which begs the question, why didn't he kill Superman when he could have killed Superman? When Metamorpho is in the movie just for the sake of being Mr. Kryptonite Hands to weaken Superman, then Lex Luthor is playing Russian roulette with someone else. That would have been a pretty good time to kill Superman.
Lex Luthor literally says why he couldn't kill Superman in the exact scene you're referencing.
Kryptonite's radioactive, right? Help me out on this, because this isn't necessarily a critique. It's just a thought that I had, but if I'm wrong about it, let me know if I'm wrong about it. Kryptonite's radioactive. So couldn't Metamorpho and Superman be in different glass boxes, but soundproof boxes, so Metamorpho can weaken Superman with the kryptonite, but Superman doesn't have the advantage of talking him out of it? Just thinking like a villain here.
Well, for one, Metamorpho could have just made the sun anyway. Metamorpho could have just also broken the glass to talk to Superman if he wanted to, if he had a change of heart. And two, if it was soundproof, Lex Luthor couldn't have interrogated Superman. And the government wouldn't have been able to talk to Superman like Lex Luthor says they wanted to.
Lex, just to be honest, does a lot of dumb things in the movie, or at least he half-asses things. Yeah, I skipped over. Alright, so there's a pocket universe that Lex has created. He has the tech to create a pocket universe. And that's where he keeps his prisoners, mostly girlfriends who besmirched him online, I guess. Bunch of monkeys trolling and canceling Superman online. I mean, that's funny and all, but that's a South Park joke, you know? That's a Family Guy joke. I don't know why it's in Superman.
A light-hearted comic book movie has a silly joke in it. Wow. Shocker.
Like when Lex goes to the Fortress of Solitude, why didn't he have Ultraman haul a big bomb there to blow it up? Why give Superman a home to even go back to?
Lex Luthor had no reason to destroy the Fortress of Solitude.
Also, that was really predictable for me, you know, when he was like, oh, hey, I can get into the Fortress of Solitude. I was like, okay, so Ultraman's a clone. That's what we learned. He's a clone. Which is funny because that would, in a sense, make Ultraman Bizarro in this movie, which would have been neat because Ultraman for a lot of the movie is all in the black outfit. I mean, he's basically, actually I'm going to cut out what I just said because that is a spoiler if you haven't read that comic book. But him being covered from head to toe, it would have been kind of neat if they illustrated, oh, it's protecting him from the sun because the sun hurts Bizarro, which would make him Bizarro.
Bizarro is an imperfect clone of Superman. As far as we know, Ultraman is a perfect clone of Superman.
However, I make the argument, even if he does live through that black hole, I don't think Superman knew he would. Superman tried to kill his clone. Say what you want about that. At least it was a moral dilemma. Immediately after Ultraman gets sucked into a black hole, Superman's like, "Quit messing around!"
I'm not messing around. I'm doing important stuff.
The difference being Ultraman was a mindless drone created by Lex Luthor. He had no other purpose than to fight Superman. So it's not hard to assume that Superman isn't as beat up about the death of Ultraman.
Can we at least agree that Lex Luthor's execution of having to shout out vitamins in order for Ultraman to actually do a move is pretty stupid? B12, D3, like he's playing Battleship or something, and that makes Ultraman do a move because he's programmed to do that? I just don't think that's efficient. Lex Luthor has to see what's happening, process what's happening, assess what the next move is, assess what one he has to say for Ultraman to do, say that code. That has to be processed by Ultraman, and then Ultraman reacts. Different universe now, but the other tech billionaire, Tony Stark, had a much more efficient way to go about it. The AI in his suit can just assess the fighting pattern and react accordingly.
Let's kick his ass.
How does Tony Stark have more efficient programmed fighting tech? And Lex Luthor, the billionaire who has nanotech and the tech to create portals to a pocket universe, is like, yeah, we'll just do this slower process.
No, we can't agree that it was lame. The film establishes that Lex Luthor has studied Superman for 3 years. Lex Luthor knows how Superman fights, he knows what these moves are, and we also see that the reaction is instant from Ultraman. We know he has these moves memorized because of the fight in the city with the Hammer of Bravia. So it's not a slower process.
It's not just Ultraman, though, that Superman might have killed in this movie. Someone had to have died in that scene, even accidentally. You're telling me Superman whipping around, just indiscriminately laser-eyeing everybody? No one accidentally took a laser to the neck or the face? I know they showed a reaction shot of a couple guys landing on the ground. They had lasers across their chest, and they're squirming like, ow, that hurt, but we're fine. So the audience knows. But accidents happen. No one took heat vision to the face, accidentally landed on their head, falling to the ground, crushing their skull, shattering their neck and spine. That's what happens when you're smashing a reporter at the Planet. They covered it up.
They were designed to fight metahumans. It's not that far off to assume they have extreme durability.
As for the Pocket Universe device, yeah, it's the device that exists in this movie for the sake of something happening for the last act of the movie.
We see the device used for faster travel. It's not fair to say that they've been only there to set up the third act.
At CinemaCon, James Gunn was talking about Krypto in this movie and how James Gunn either had or has this dog that was just an unruly dog. He said the dog was the worst, and he would nip at his heels, and he'd have to do his emails while he sat on the counter with his feet up. Otherwise, the dog would nip at his feet. Hence the inspiration for Krypto. By inspiration, I mean a James Gunn life insert into the Superman movie. The problem is, James Gunn wrote Superman to deal with an unruly dog how James Gunn dealt with an unruly dog. But that's not how I feel Superman would deal with an unruly dog. I just feel like Superman would have that vibe of Krypto. Sit. Stay. And that's that. It feels like James Gunn sacrificed Superman's authoritative status in the name of making him more generally relatable.
It's not his dog. That's why Krypto's not listening to Superman.
But I couldn't shake the fact that having Krypto out there in the world, even if he's helping Superman, is really irresponsible. If Krypto ends up seeing a kid with a ball, throwing the ball to his dad or something, and that catches Krypto's eye, and Krypto does this to them, they die. If Superman had his house in order and had Krypto trained like John Wick has his dog trained.
For most of the movie, Krypto's in the fortress, so we can assume that Superman leaves Krypto in the fortress whenever he goes out.
But when Superman can't get this dog to mind him, and his dog isn't listening to him, I just think to myself, well, why would the Justice League listen to you? Why would people listen to you?
You do realize a dog not listening is much more different than the Justice League or people, right? Superman is still an authority figure.
What's up? Millie Alcock as Supergirl. She's a complete and total drunk. I was like, why is Supergirl Dee from It's Always Sunny? She's completely shit-faced, and she gets Krypto back, and she's like, later, boners. She says bitches. I thought of Dee, though. When I think of Supergirl, I don't think of Dee from It's Always Sunny. The show did Supergirl better. Best I can tell right now, anyway. I feel like if Supergirl landed into the Fortress of Solitude drunk, Superman would probably lecture her. Lecture her about drinking and flying. I mean, it sounds silly to say out loud, but I feel like if a Kryptonian's drunk and they land on Earth, there is a possibility that they're gonna come in too hot and create a crater where a city used to be. That's a dangerous thing. Why would Superman just roll his eyes and be like, oh, she likes to get shit-faced. All right, super bots, what were we talking about? He didn't care in this movie. That's just weird. Makes him come across as irresponsible. As well as Supergirl, you know, she comes across as irresponsible as well. They're just an irresponsible family, I guess. Also, if she goes to planets with red suns so she can get drunk, how does she get home if she doesn't have powers on that planet with the red sun? If she has a vehicle to fly home, when she enters this solar system, wouldn't she get her powers back, in which case she wouldn't be drunk anymore? So why is she in the Fortress of Solitude drunk?
The writer for Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow explains why Kara drinks in the book. She's drinking to forget. Considering her movie is based off the book, we can also assume that's the reason why Kara is drunk in Superman. Also, yes, she uses the ship to get between planets. In an interview, James Gunn confirmed that this Kara is a mess. Gunn also confirmed that Kara has a more difficult background than Superman. So from that, we can assume that Kara is drinking to forget and partying to forget. Also, yes, in the book, it was shown that she used the ship to get to and from. Well, that's the end of the video. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and I hope y'all appreciate Superman more. I'll see y'all in the next one.